Kalena Aloha and welcome to Hanahana o Oha, brought to you by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Thank you for joining us. Our Office of Hawaiian Affairs Public Policy Advocacy PAIA has sponsored our talk story sessions during the 61st annual Merrie Monarch. Aloha, my name is Shane Akoni Nelson. I am a public policy advocate for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, based out of our West Hawaii Resource Center. And joining me today to co-facilitate our discussion is Kealoha Pisciotta, my coworker over on the east side with the Public Policy Advocacy PAIA as well. Also joining us, and mahalo for bringing all the logistics together, is our other public policy advocate, Kamaile Puluole-Mitchell. She's behind the scenes, obviously, doing all of the logistic works for us as we have our. Before we start our conversations this morning, I'd like to introduce a very special person who made an appearance this morning, our trustee for Hawaii Island, Trustee Miloli Trask. Trustee, you want to share a few words for us this morning, please?
Aloha, everyone, and especially aloha to those who are viewing from home. This is the first in a series of 3 that we're going to be doing with this Merrie Monarch session. And I'm so happy and proud to be here as the trustee of OHA from the Big Island, because this is an area of critical import to our people, especially those who are here from the Big Island. Very few of our community-based subsistence fishing areas remain. And this morning, we're going to start by taking a realistic look at some of the challenges that are facing them. One of the things I had wanted to say was I wanted to really thank and recognize our OHA staffers, Kalena, Akoni, and Kealoha, who are all part of our OHA team that is now doing a deep dive on how we can better protect our Aina-based and ocean-based resources for subsistence and for our own cultural survival. So it's so appropriate that we begin our 3-panel session by taking a look at the foundation, at what is the papa for our culture, and that is the wellspring of indigenous traditional knowledge. These videos are going to be saved, so there's no worry or pilikia for the younger ones who are not here or others, because it's OHA commitment to keep this data together so that we can build upon it in the future. Mahalo for including us, and I look forward to working with you folks in the future. My office is here. We have a good group of women working hard for our people. You have any need for help, just call here, and we will see what we can do. Malama, good job, team.
Mahalo, Trustee. Thank you for the kind words and the encouraging words for us to move forward. Thank you so much for showing up this morning and giving us some encouragement for work that's ahead of us during this Merrie Monarch time. So thank you very much, Trustee. Mahalo nui. We're live streaming right now from Nani Gardens in Panaeva, Hawaii. I love this place. Look at our weather. It's gray skies. It has the ua, the kanilehua. Everything of Panaeva makes Merrie Monarch that very much special for the feel that we have here and the mana that exudes during this time of the year here at Panaeva. So today's panel discussion is also brought to you by the very important students from Hilo High, K Vikes. Thank you so much for setting up our technology and providing the opportunity for us to live stream. So mahalo to the students from Hilo High School who are doing such a fantastic job helping us to bring our word, our advocacy, and OHA's efforts into our community. Thank you very much. Before we also move on, I'd like to also thank Nani Gardens for providing a very nice space for us to have this discussion, a very safe space and a place where we can have deep dive discussions on some issues that are near and dear to Kanaka. And not just Kanaka, but also the broader community. For more information about Nanimau Gardens, please visit their website, nanimaugardens.com. Very easy. Or check out their social media on Facebook or on Instagram. You can just kind of Google them out as well. In the spirit of the 61st annual Merrie Monarch Festival, we look forward to our discussion this morning. But before we start our discussion on traditional knowledge, I'd like to ask our panelists to ground our space with Olelo No'eau. If I can first ask Uilani if she could share your Olelo No'eau to ground our space, please.
Sure. I vava no kahale kanaka, na vai e vava kahale kanaka ole. And it speaks to us hearing the voices when it's occupied by Kanaka. But do we hear and do we listen to the environment when Kanaka is not present? Or when our kupuna have passed on, do we still understand how to listen? So, yeah.
Awesome. Mahalo nui ui. Kalena, if you don't mind sharing your Olelo No'eau.
Yes, aloha. My Olelo No'eau is Kia'i ka io I kana maupua, and it is the hawk that watches and guards over her children, which are us, so that we can always look to the heavens and see for recognition and acknowledgement if we're making the right choices or decisions or they're affirming what we're doing.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you very much for grounding our space this morning and starting our conversations off. Before we also start our conversations, I'd like to provide a brief synopsis into the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and who we are as your agency for Kanaka advocacy. So this year's Merrie Monarch 2024, Hanahana O'oha, we have our first panel discussion on Indigenous Traditional Ecological Knowledge, or ITEC, I-T-E-K. And our discussion on that will be focused on how we implement traditional knowledge into governance and what that looks like. What are our challenges? What are our successes? And what is our homework geared towards for the near future for Kanaka? All of our work here at Office of Hawaiian Affairs is founded or guided by Manai Mauliola, which is our strategic values that's strengthened to our well-being. Our strategic foundations are based on Aina, Mo'omehiu, and Ohana, and our strategic pathways are educational, economic stability, quality housing, as well as health outcomes. You can find more of that information on our website at oha.org. As to how OHA is being guided today. Just a brief history. Office of Hawaiian Affairs started in 1978 through the state's constitutional convention, and we were created to address and remediate historical injustices perpetuated against Native Hawaiians. So the state legislature enacted Chapter 10 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes, making OHA a semi-autonomous self-governing body that outlines the established public trust to include the betterment of the conditions for Native Hawaiians. There's federal legislation as well. The Native Hawaiians are recognized through various congressional acts and resolutions, such as the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act of 1920, which is U.S. Public Law 86-3, as well as the Native Hawaiian Health Care Improvement Act, as well as the Native Hawaiian Education Act, and through other informal resolutions such as the Apology Bill, and more important, through the Congressional Act of Admissions Act, sorry, yeah, the Admissions Act of 1959 that gives us our federal nexus as well. So OHA's mandate and purpose starts with Article 12, Section 5. The trust responsibility holds to real and personal property held in the trust for Native Hawaiians. Article 7, Section 6 also allows the management and administration proceeds from the sale or disposition of land, natural resources, minerals, and income derived from whatever sources for Native Hawaiians. They also, all the incomes and proceeds from the pro rata portion of the public trust granted to the state by the Section 5B of the Admissions Act, formulates policy relating the Native Hawaiian affairs, exercise control over real and personal property, set aside and transferred to OHA. So all of these things are what drives our agency to better the conditions of Native Hawaiians, which leads us to our conversation today with ITEC, with Indigenous Traditional Ecological Knowledge. So again, I'd like to mahalo K-Vikes for bringing us to the world, as well as Nani Gardens. Today, I'd like to formally introduce our two guests. We have ilani Naipo, who serves as the administrator for Miloli Community-Based Subsistence Fishing Area, or CBSFA. And we also have Kalena Blakemore, who has been with OHA for 7 years and currently serves as the Legacy Land Management Specialist at Vaukeleopuna Rainforest here in Panaeva. So I'm going to ask each of you, both of you, to sort of do a ho'olauna and elaborate on a little bit about yourself. If you can tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, in particularly if you can share with us, where does Native Hawaiian Indigenous knowledge reside in the work that you do? So I'm going to start with you, Uilani, if you can ho'olauna with us, please.
Yeah. Ilani Naipo, I actually live here in Panaeva, but my family is from Miloli. Kopiko Ohana is from Miloli, so raised in Miloli, and so a lot of the work, I came into this role that I do now. It's funny because you mentioned, I had to give a title. Yeah. So my title changes depending on who I'm talking to. And if I need to assert my title in getting recognition and having a seat at the table, then I create a title that allows me to get there. But normally, linear descendant of Miloli gets me to the table, no matter where, a lot of discussions that I've been a part of. Ikikupuna, if you know Miloli'i being the last Hawaiian fishing village, a title that was, bestowed upon the community, it's not one that we made ourselves. I think it really was the impression it made to others that were visiting the area, because it was a step back in time. We still have our traditional fishing practices. Opelu is, what we're known for. We still have our pelu nets, the traditions around that, but more so is lavaia, and I think it's taken out of context every time someone calls himself lavaia. But lavaia includes the discipline of caring for the resource, not just the skill set of, I know that fish and I can get that fish. You want it? Kind of thing. It really is talking about traditional practice in the full context of being responsible of the resource. And so all of that is encompassed in the work that happens in Miloli'i. It's a lifestyle. It's, when we achieved finally our rules to be promulgated, it didn't change our lifestyle. It did, in the co-management position we acquired with the state. Now we were monitoring, and now we were being accountable to the state. But in our lifeways, Ikikupuna is a living, breathing. It is part of the village. It's part of the people that are there. And it's definitely at the forefront anytime we have a conversation about our CBSFA, about our community. It has to be. It just has to be. Yeah.
For mahalo. Sure. Yeah. Mahalo nui ui for introducing yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Kalena, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you include traditional knowledge in the work that you do?
Of course. So my name is Kalena Blakemore. It's my married name. My maiden name is Keawe Kalekini. I was born on Oahu, but I was raised in the Central Coast of California, away from my Hawaiian family. And then I came back to this island because I fell in love here in the 80s and thought I need to come back home here. And then as I started doing my genealogy, I found out all my ohana is from this island. My tutuman's from Kohala. My tutu wahine is born in Ola'a, where I live, in Volcano. So I came right back home. And my middle name is Kahawaiola'a, so it was just weird to end up living in Ola'a and having that be in my name. I've been back here for 25 years. I raised my 2 daughters here with my husband, and they're now on the mainland. I still currently serve on the Hawaii Island Burial Council. I represent Puna. I work for OHA as the land manager for Vaukeleo Puna, which again, ironically, has substantial burial caves loaded with iwi kapuna, which I know are my ohana. Yep. So again, weaving always coming back, just like kia ikaio ikana maupua. You look at the heavens and see and make choices and decisions about where you're going, and I'm always having it affirmed, you're right where you're supposed to be. My Hawaiian indigenous knowledge, or ike kapuna, it comes from the clouds, it comes from the wind, it comes from the rain, it comes from birdsong, it comes from the ocean. Everything that feeds me and informs my decisions are constantly governed by the elements. I am an animist. I respond to my environment that way, and I respect our kua and our na'aumakua through the elements that we are exposed to, our pohaku, our plants, all of it. So, oddly, it's like that's where our ike kapuna is. That's our akua, and everything that I have is innate and intuitive from those elementals.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about yourselves, your background. Tees up perfect for the discussion that we're having. So we have 2 of the great panelists today to dive deep into our topic. So with that, let's just jump right in. Let's just get comfortable and jump right in. So with that, our question, our first subject matter question is, now that, let's see, Kealoha.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Introduce a little bit.
What's that?
You want me to talk about it a little bit too?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Kealoha to give us a brief synopsis of what does indigenous traditional ecological knowledge really mean. It's a lot of words. It's hydraulical. But what does ITEC really mean, Kealoha? Can you help us out a little bit?
Okay. Basically, Kalena asked me, Kealoha, I'm reading the guidance document, but isn't this what we've been doing all along? And the answer is yes. The ITK is named even that ITK, TEK, Indigenous Traditional Ecological Knowledge. But what makes ITEK important for our Lahui to look at is that it is actually a mandate in the policy of the United States of America. It is handed down by the White House to recognize indigenous traditional ecological knowledge and recognize the peoples, the indigenous peoples that hold that knowledge, and to ask and require all federal agencies now in the federal government to incorporate it where it is relevant and where it's helpful to help climate change in particular. But not only that, to co-manage our resources and things like that. So don't be, put off by the big words. It really is our ike kupuna. It is our life ways, and it is now recognized and elevated to the highest place in government, and that was the Biden administration turned that into the policy of the United States. And so that's one of the important reasons we want to bridge, what we do actually and how we have to approach that,
Yes.
even up to the highest level of government. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kealoha. I appreciate that. And what I also wanted to throw in the mix is that we cannot have, or at least the advocacy eye that OHA has on federal policies is to ensure that they're not doing blanket policy statements as well. And so our traditional knowledge applies to place-based activities. Our culture is place-based. Hence, the beauty between East and West Hawaii Island. They're different but unified. Yeah. Which brings me to Uilani. Being place-based. Let's talk about place-based traditional knowledge. How does Miloli define and apply ITEC for its CBSFA? Can you give us some examples as to how does that roll out?
Sure. So when ITEC came out, I think we were hot and heavy moving towards putting our rule package together and proposal to the state. And when that was happening, it didn't apply to us much because we're already in motion. It's not tangible to us, Kanaka, that are in our spaces, in our places, managing our resources day to day, living our lifestyle the way we do. However, it's really significant when we look back at some of the footprint that's been left behind. Knowing that Hawaii as a kingdom, our monarchy days, there was a constitution. What's relevant today is in 1959, we have our constitution. It makes apparent our native rights, traditional and customary rights, and it identifies and it protects them. And so here we have a blurb that points just exactly to that. But if we look closely into Article 12, and you referenced that earlier, as a basis for OHA to be established, Article 12 speaks to Native Hawaiian affairs, yes. But particularly Section 7, traditional and customary rights. So if you look at this, it says who is responsible for upholding our native rights, who is it for? It's defined in there, Native Hawaiians who inhabited the Hawaiian Islands prior to contact. And it tells you exactly the context for which we can call out these rights, subsistence, culture, and religion. So then now we roll forward, and we're in 1994, we have community-based subsistence fishing area. The definition pulls a lot of this language out and puts it into that. So we have a HRS 188.22.6, and then if you look at this, in just a second, it's going to highlight in bold particular language that pulls out of your constitution, our constitution. At the very bottom, again, it defines and pulls and makes sure it's very clear, Native Hawaiians being those of the descendants prior to contact. And then it further defines because it puts it into context about what is subsistence. And in this particular case, the activity is fishing. And so it further defines subsistence, meaning the customary and traditional Native Hawaiian uses of renewable ocean resources for direct personal or family consumption or sharing. This is really key because this is the only fishery managed area designation that's based on the premise of traditional and customary practices for Native Hawaiians. The only one. So this is hardly used. It's a very long, arduous process to go through and get this designation and then formulate rules. It's right now, just of last month, we have now 3 CBSFAs. One, Kalena. Yep. Miloli. We were the second, Miloli, and then Kipahulu just got through. So again, if you look at the similarities between the 3 communities that were able to establish their CBSFA with rules, they have common personalities, and if you look at all of them, they're used to being off-grid, self-sufficient. You look at Hanahana, you look at Kipahulu, they're the same. They get their water from the streams, And so the resilience in our people that are still tied to these areas that have been able to establish the CBSFA needs to be protected. Those lifestyles and life ways are very important to us. Yeah. I think after this, we roll forward and Kapa'akai analysis. We go into a little bit more information. I think Akoni and Kealoha will share a little bit more. But the important thing to know about this is a Hawaii Supreme Court hearing, and the decision coming out of it then identified an analytical framework that says, Okay, remember we talked about who is responsible for recognizing and protecting our Native rights? It's the state. So the state is responsible for their due diligence in identifying all Native Hawaiian rights, impact to our practices and our resources, and here it holds it accountable. So now all of the agencies, when they're putting forth proposals for development, must go through this. So I'm really happy to say that I'm very active in Department of Land and Natural Resources, that there have been a lot of movement requiring a lot of the different divisions to be doing this in any of their updates to their management plans about our forests, our streams, and so forth. That's great. But we look towards our local county, they're not doing so much of this, and we need to hold them accountable. So, yeah, that's that. Then the last one, resource that I have to share, it's really important. These are all different documents. Again, from the footprint of our kupuna, some of them no longer with us, left behind all of these documents that it makes it important and it supports you when you assert your Native Hawaiian rights. So at the very bottom is my favorite one, number 4. We declare our willingness to share our knowledge with humanity, provided that we determine when, why, and how it is used. We have the right to exclude from use those who would exploit, privatize, and unfairly commercialize our traditional knowledge, cultural expressions, and art forms, natural resources, biological material, and intellectual properties. Really key. So all of these references that I just went through are really important because they're stepping stones and pathways that support our assertion of having community-based knowledge and our iki kupuna within governance. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that, Uilani, because I remember having discussion with the Ohana down in Miloli several years back, and talking about promulgating the CBSFA, and you guys are planning your scoping work, and all of the headaches and the burdens that typically would be placed on the government to deliver, but that was placed on the community to deliver, because it became your kuleana to solicit input for your rules and your and everything that you're putting together in your package. And I think what I'm getting at is how your community came to these laws and these declarations, and how you applied them in your steps moving forward, which gave you your community a solid information, foundation to take your next steps. Not the last ones, but the next ones. Yeah.
And so, when we were going through the process, we make all these assertions that I just shared. But then it was after we got our rules promulgated, then we announced that we had really codified our traditional practices. Yeah. We didn't want to do it earlier because you don't give the power to somebody else to say, oh, yeah, by the way, no. Let us make the move, and then we assert that we codified our traditional practices. And then people still have a problem with some of our rules, and we say, well, this is the way our kupuna taught us, and we're managing our resources, so this is the way we continue in today.
I think those are the challenges of place-based knowledge and how it's applied, and how sometimes traditional and customary rights is a blanket policy that gives everyone the right to practice. But then the kuleana of place-based management has to be applied somehow, right?
Yes.
And that's what we're seeing in our CBSFAs at Hanahana, at Miloli, and now we get to see this fold out in Kipahulu as well.
Yeah. So going back to my Olelo No'eau, it really is, do you hear the laws of the land, or what our natural resources are requiring us to do? We continue on with the Iki Kupuna by listening and understanding and being able to interpret, just like what Kalena was saying, was being able to interpret the wind and the rain. What are the messages they're giving you? So very important to take that.
Yeah, we're loving this Panayava rain today. I'm loving it. It's awesome. Yeah. Makes me want to drink more mamaki lychee tea.
I wanted to point out one thing, too, about the Pa'akalani Declaration.
Yes.
Our trustee, Mililani Trask, played a role in helping to... Sorry. to interpret. I'm so sorry. To
Silent your phone. I'm
when
just
she
kidding.
was
Yeah.
working at, being chair at the United Nations regarding the Indigenous, the working group or the permanent
Caucus.
forum,
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
help codify some of that language
Yep.
and see. So it goes all the way from the international into
Yep.
our Ike Kupuna.
Yeah.
Now, but I'm supposed to ask Kalena a question.
Yeah, so, before we ask Kalena a question, I'd like to say that now that we heard how traditional knowledge was implemented in a community, now we get to see how it folds out from a government perspective and how does a government agency like Office of Hawaiian Affairs start to implement traditional knowledge into a management plan for the community. So one is community and one is for the community. And so we get to hear how Kalena is working that out in Vaukeleopuna. So yeah, Kealoha, if you want to...
We mainly want to ask, if you can describe not only your successes or challenges in your process to help people understand how Vaukele works and how you're protecting and how you're doing your work there, carrying on traditions.
Well, first of all, I could not believe what a kuleana it was and what a bizarre blessing to have it fall into my lap because I didn't understand the history and background of Vaukele because I was on the mainland. One thing I do sense from that property, though, is that the aina is a kua and it is our kupuna. So it's really important that we take care of it. And for me, that one, olelo no eau, he ali'i ka aina, he kawa, ke kanaka, so applies to Vaukeleopuna, that we are the servants and that land is our ali'i, but also a kua, because ali'i is a kua. That land was so badly abused. It was traded. It was ceded land. It was supposed to be cared for by DLNR, and they traded it, and we're going to implement some geothermal industry there. And just the thought that they traded that land to do that, it's our land. It's Hawaiian Kingdom land. So right there, it created the environment for the biggest protest Hawaiian history had ever experienced before TMT. We had 1,400 people protesting and breaking the fence down, and 140 people were arrested. So the people were speaking that they did not want that activity there, and that was our aina that was being destroyed. Actually, when you go out there, you can see where the lines where they made their drill site actually ripped our forest open, so it's now contaminated with invasive species that we have to work and battle with. It's the Pele Defense Fund versus Patty is a huge lawsuit that came because of that action, and it also opened up the Article 12, Section 7 for people to practice, and you didn't necessarily have to be from Puna now. You just have to be Hawaiian at Vaukele. It's the heart of Pele and Hi'iaka, our mo'olelo, and you will know when you go there, you can feel it and see it, and if you know that story, the whole story comes alive in the forest because of that. It's also the intersection and meeting place of Pele and Kane, the god of water. It's our watershed. It covers 20% of the Pahoa aquifer. It's a seed bank. It's like there are plants that we thought were extinct, and like 37 plants were left in the world of particular plants that we have at Vaukele.
37?
Yeah, not anymore though.
Oh.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
We're doing good. So it's a very precious resource culturally and naturally, our natural and cultural resources, and that's why we want to protect it and preserve it and malama it, and we work with the people in our community to do that. But I don't know if we have other things that we have to talk about.
Yeah, actually, I did want to elaborate a little bit more on how the Office of Hawaiian Affairs collaborates with community. What type of community do they collaborate with in stewarding Vaukeleopuna, being its ceded lands,
Right.
kingdom lands, and how does that roll out today, and what is OHA's role in that process? Yeah.
Well, DLNR, we had an MOA with DLNR for 10 years. We acquired Vaukele in 2006, and they were supposed to write a comprehensive management plan and just take care of what they could of that property. But by 2016, we didn't have a CMP yet, a comprehensive management plan, so and the MOA expired. So that's right when I came to work at Vaukele was 2017, and so they started writing the OHA took over the land and started doing community engagement. Every month we formed a group, a working group, AHA Kuka working group, and it was all subject matter experts, that, you know, archaeology, cultural practitioners, plant people, ethnobotanists.
So prior to not having a CMP, what did the management plan consist of?
There was none. There wasn't one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, yeah. So when OHA took over, we just had invited people to the table, and they became our working group for 2 years.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you're able to capture not just subject matter expertise, but also traditional knowledge as well in that Kuka group.
It was fascinating because I came in like in the last 2 meetings, and we had them monthly, and they had a criteria and a survey and a ranking and rating to see, unfortunately, who can, you know, be vetted to best serve. And there were, you know, like who lives close, who lives in Puna, who are Puna residents, who can come, who can make it. Do they have a hidden agenda? You know, are they going to be, do they understand the vision of the CMP? Because there's work that needs to be done. So whoever's coming has to be productive at the table. Yeah, so and so I remember watching the writers, the authors, we would have slideshows every meeting once a month. So literally it was the CMP was fluid. And somebody from the month before would be, I didn't say that. And then you could see them changing it, you know, right on the screen. What did you say? So our whole CMP was written like that. And there's things in it that I'm really glad that protect our resource. And then there's things I wish we had a little more flexibility. But, you know, we have to honor and respect the people that help create that document. And I like it. It saves me. It saves me for when people say, we want to film Godzilla versus Kong. Can we come to your Aina? And I'm like, oh my God, how do I say no? You know,
right. How about
and then we have like we need to make money.
Yeah.
You know, our trustees are like, how can we make money off this? I'm like, you know, we don't want Godzilla versus Kong because for sure Tutu Pele will erupt, you know, and show herself. Like, no, it's Pele versus Kong and Godzilla. But so I appreciate one of our rules in our CMP is no commercial activities. And so I know we're going to have beautiful opportunities in the future for Hawaiian cultural documentaries, language, hula. And so I just hope that if I'm there, I can bend, you know, and say, okay, can we make this and meet our people, use our Aina in a way that's culturally appropriate?
I remember I was hosting the Hawaii Island Board of Trustees meeting in Kona. At that meeting is when the CMP was adopted by the trustees, and I remember all of the kupuna busted out to Kona, and they took the long trip and on their wheelchairs and everything, and they made sure that they stood by their word.
Yep.
That CMP was developed by them,
for
them, and for the Aina, and they loved it. I remember, and they were all honored. I remember in that meeting, and so. Thanks for giving us a picture or painting that picture of how traditional knowledge is incorporated into government, or can be maybe a lesson for other government agencies to, what do we call it? We call it not proper consultation, but meaningful consultation. Yeah, I mean, I mean, we still have homework to do in OHA as well on how to deliver meaningful consultation, but I think when the people can stand next to that CMP and believe in it because it's their words and then carry it out and enforce it, with the support of OHA facilitating that, I think that was a very successful process.
Yeah, and we still have a kuleana to it, you know.
The kuleana is important.
Because there's things we're supposed to do there. Our community-based stewardship. We need to have relationships with our hunters, with our cultural practitioners, with our children, most especially our kids in school groups. So, you know, when you see them, they're like, "What are you doing? So what you guys doing? You know what? You know?" And they're like, we're doing this, we're doing that. And I'm always there at the gate. Come in. Please come. Let's do. We're here for you. And it's a joy and pleasure actually to share our aina like that. You know.
And for our children to see.
Yes. They're so, and to learn. It's being used as a classroom.
To touch hiaka, to touch kane. That's amazing.
Well, I have a question. I'm interested. Do you have a kupuna council that advises constantly into what happens?
Good question. So after we had a sunset on our Ahakuka council, and immediately I started trying to form a new group of specialists for the future always. So and that's our Ahakaya Ulu working group. I need to meet with them more, but we got COVID. You know, these certain things kind of got in the way, but they're specialized. We have had one gathering with them, and so we have plant people, we have hula practitioners, we have hunters, we have educators, teachers with the local schools and then university.
Nice.
Nice mix.
Yes.
Awesome.
And they're not all Hawaiian, you know, and I know sometimes they want, let's just only have, you know, Hawaiians, but we have a lot of specialists too that are in our group, and I'm glad they're there. We need to have them, and
the diversity, the community coming together and supporting. I like that you know, Kealoha and I go and speak in different groups a lot, and we always accentuate how traditional and customary rights and practices, and you know, those laws are foundational for Native Hawaiians, but the entire community benefits from the Native Hawaiian laws and stuff like that. So it's not just geared. I mean, it is geared towards Native Hawaiians, but the entire community ends up benefiting from this process. And being able to access resources like Waukeleo Puna, being able to engage in CBSFA management, you know, marine and shoreline management. Given that I don't know if this would apply to you, Kalena, most, but I made mention about how government framework and policy development is kind of a blanket statement kind of process. Do you think that Waukeleo Puna kind of broke that tradition by creating this type of meaningful consultation, or do you think that that was still kind of in the box of blanket policy making?
You know, I don't think so, because we have guidelines and rules that probably DLNR wouldn't want to adhere to. You know?
Did we say that out loud?
I did say it. It's recorded now. It's recorded.
But Facebook.
No, I did say that. But we function in a different way. We're more flexible, and I think because we are quasi-state, we have more liberties to serve our beneficiaries. And I'm glad we have that. It's nice. Yeah,
awesome. 1 second. Before we move on to our next question, Uilani, what about the CBSFA? You know, CBSFA is a blanket policy, right? Share a little bit about what your community's challenges. As I mentioned, it took years. How many years did it take your community?
It took an entire generation.
Wow. What is that? Can you give us a number?
And the reason why I answer it that way versus it took 18 plus years is because the people that started it are no longer here. That's important. And the kids that were a part of it, when we finally got our rules promulgated, they were never born at the time that it
And the challenge for that was because it was a blanket statement.
Well, a challenge, there's several things. Challenges because prior to Miloli getting its rules promulgated, it really, you only had Ha'ena. Every community is different. Although there's, you know, some you know, things that were in common, and, you know, fisheries management is also very place-based. And so the state agency had a difficult time in working with us as a community.
Yeah.
And recognizing that we are different from Haena.
Yeah.
Haena should be, respected to be the Konehiki of today for their place, and we are Konehiki for our place. But the process, going through the process was very, very difficult, and we were challenging the state along the way. I think the assertions that I showed in the references were done at a lower level of our lifeways, like telling them, we went out to scoping, and then someone else is challenging us to say, what are you doing all the way down Ka'u? Why down so far down? And then we have to say, things like we normally would say in our lifeways. The way we would answer is like, that's our ohana, and we reside down there. The villages along the coastline heading down south no longer exist, but we know they're there. Our kuleana still resides there, even though the villages no longer exist. And that's something that they don't understand. People are not there, like Wawaiia no Kahale Kanaka. So when people are there, then they recognize that. But when people are not there, they don't. Like they want something, just like Mauna Kea. Nobody's there. Nobody using it. Just like our coastline. We have 18.6 miles of coastline. People don't live all the way down the extent. Miloli is right smack in the middle. We're, very small portion of it. But still, our kuleana traverses the entire area. So part of our challenges as we, now that post-promulgating rules, is that there's a lot of researchers that still want to come in and talk about knowledge, access to knowledge. So there was, we had a researcher's guideline that would it was to put together questions and have an agreement for researchers, whether they were students, whether they were NGOs or what have you, that when they come into our waters, they abide by our lifeways and our values. And then when it comes to the outcome of their research, they can never retell our narrative. That was so key to us. Do not retell our narrative. The person behind the camera and the person who says the narrative is very important to us. So a lot of times it's easy for us to say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't allow you to do that research here, because they're not Kanaka. We get people from all over the world that want to do research in our waters. And that's one thing. But then we realized that we have to update that research guideline and make it for knowledge access.
Yes.
Because knowledge access comes in different forms.
Yes.
Sometimes they're coming to teach something like about sharks or whatever.
Yes.
And when they teach, they're taking all the pictures of our keiki and they're making whole film production out of it. And it was like, oh no. Or knowing that our tiger sharks do a certain behavior during a certain time of year. And you remember, you were in that conversation. Yes. We were being consulted on a special access permit. And when we're asking all these questions, mind you, the state was not asking the questions. We, as our this is our waters, we're asking, why are you here at this time of the year and now? Why do you have to do it now? Commercial tour group guy told me, now's the time to go. And I was like, So when he was excused, the applicant was excused, and we all started pouring out all these information. It was like, okay, nothing gets recorded right now. We told the state that nothing gets recorded, but here you go. And we started to lay down some of these behaviors and just the way that we conduct ourselves in our different spaces. You just don't do this, we don't. And the questions for their special access permit was really saying, okay, who are you working for, and what is the research, and what is the data you're after, and that's it. I was like, but you're coming into a special place to conduct something that may not be pono. And so that the whole teaching of that and the reasoning of all of that is like we having to teach our life ways. And that's a struggle. So recently we've been working with the state to say, you need to change your process. We shouldn't be, your researchers should be coming in with a culture advisor from the get-go.
There's got to be a code of ethics kind of process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially, A lot of our places, like, as soon as you get through a CBSFA, everybody wants to pour in. I checked on Kipahulu, and they go, "Oh yeah, Auntie, how do I tell them no?" I go, "Well, how did you come up with wanting to say no?" "Well, they're not even from here." I go, "There you go. That's your basis, baby."
Again, yeah.
You know, but that's the thing. You know, if they were escorted by someone that had done similar studies in Hawaii, that would be more amenable to us.
Yeah.
But these are all the challenges. And when they come in droves, like 5+ people, and that's a lot for us to take on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But those are the challenges now.
Yeah.
Mahalo, thank you for, that's deep stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
I can see how
PTSD going through my head right now.
we all have a little.
Yeah.
That is it.
Yeah.
Okay, but can I ask you, Kalena, why should our county, state, and federal government protect the conservation, like in places such as, well, in both of your guys' places as well, but
Valkele. Like, why not? Why? I mean, I know that the Native Hawaiians came forward, and you said 1,400 people came forward and protested. And at some point they had to listen to that voice. But how come the county, state, and federal governments in your opinion, how come they don't set aside these conservations? And even Mauna Kea is a conservation district as well. So in your opinion, if you can explain, why is it important for our county, state, and federal governments to set aside these conservation areas, such as Valkele o Puna, or even in Mauna Kea, if you can speak on that as well.
and continue to protect that, to hold on to what that actually means.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for the obvious reasons why they should be protected. They're the sacred sites, our burials, our cultural practices.
So even though there are cultural practices and sacred sites, how does that benefit the entire community and not just one specific community?
It doesn't really.
How is that?
It doesn't sometimes. I mean, Valkele got zoned conservation after the geothermal pulled out.
Yeah.
So it was a natural area reserve before. So it was viewed as something to protect and care for. But then when money came into the picture, it shifted and it went into, no, we can use it for this particular activity, extraction. And then as soon as that protest took place, then it got turned into conservation, which makes it really hard to do stuff now. Like just to put a toilet in, or if I want to put a fence up to protect plants or keep the pigs out of an area, I have to go to OCCL and, and go jump through all these hoops and hope and pray that my friends will come and help me, in those different departments.
Yes.
And, come on, I'll get you,
Yes.
come on.
Yep.
So I can't really, I don't know, I don't trust sometimes the politics and our government to honor and respect conservation areas.
Yep.
I can't answer, I don't have a good answer for that.
Yeah, there's not enough stability in the political landscape to have stable and consistent administration, which causes the rift on the Aina.
Right.
Yeah?
Continuity,
The continuity
of leadership.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Kealoha.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to add something?
Yeah, for sure, of course.
I just wanted to add something. I first want to say Hawaii is unique in the Union in that we have two constitutional provisions, right? One that protects the environment and one that expressly protects Native Hawaiian traditional and customary religious and cultural practice. That gives us a lot of power in many ways. But that isn't necessarily carried all the way through, even though it's part of our Constitution, right? And we then have court-made law, like PASH, the PASH decision, Kapa'akai also.
Yes.
And one of the issues that we always are facing is that in that, Kapa'akai stressed two major things. One is that they cannot delegate authority to someone else to do it. It's the state's affirmative duty to do it. and trying to get the state to affirmatively understand their affirmative duty and to actually exercise it. So when Kapa'akai was brought to the court, and it was, by the way, it's practitioners who bring it to the court, right? Then the court had to set up the framework, right? Say that no, it's not okay for the state to delegate that to someone else to do on their behalf. They have to do it. And also to ensure that it's a framework for enforcement of our constitutional rights. You know, so all of these things come into play, and the people who are actually doing it are the ones, and the Kanaka who are, you know, generationally connected to a certain place. They are the ones who can continue to assert that, and that's important for our, you know, for our lahui to know that, you know, these are tools now, including the ITEK is now a tool that all of our Kanaka can use to help bring that forward and bring those cases. It's unfortunate that we have to be the ones to bring it. And if we keep moving, I think eventually the state's going to, you know, take more seriously.
No, I see.
And not put the
your
burden.
point.
Yeah, you know.
I understand now what you're saying. We're talking about ITEK, and how can we use that as a tool? And it's their words that framed that, that articulated that. Yeah, we can do it. We can use that in our format of testimony, or protesting and arguing a point when there's a development that we don't approve of, and we can take it right back to Kapa'akai and run it through this analysis and validate the people that see and feel things through the wind. And I mean, to be able to say, you know, like, this is my Vatican. You know, Kipukaki is my Vatican. Would you fly a helicopter in the Vatican? No. So please validate how Indigenous people, they receive and you know, care for their spaces. Yeah, I understand.
I have one question. Yeah, thanks, mahalo nui, Kalena. I have one question, and after this question, we have a slew of questions from our audience on Facebook and our social media.
Oh, really?
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, we have a slew of them, and I'm excited to hopefully we can go through them. I know we have. Oh, we still got some time. Awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
So ITK is about applying traditional knowledge in the process. Does your community only allow ilani, Native Hawaiians, or does it allow to build community to be inclusive of non-Native Hawaiians, and how is it applied?
So really key when we promulgated our rules, and we started putting in place monitoring. The monitoring was, how did we say it? We said we created this on the premise of our traditional knowledge and our practices. We will make way for Western science in that order.
Try again.
So we our rules and our life ways actually dictated by traditional knowledge, and but we make way for Western science to take place. So one good example, which you know, you could think like, well, maybe you should, like our monitoring team have the funding to send them, and you know, you send your boys to your godsons to scuba training, so they can do prolonged dives and stock assessments and so forth. And I questioned in my group, and I said, you know, if you go and train that way, and so what happens to your traditional knowledge? What about what you see, what you feel when you go in the ocean? Where does that go? Does that get displaced because all of a sudden you're comfortable in your wetsuits or dry suits? And so one good point was that they went diving after they just got new gear, right?
Yeah.
And I asked them, I go, so how was it? Oh, I could stay under for I could stay in the water for 2 hours. I go, before, how would you? What was your practice?
Yeah.
Oh, we just went in, catch, and then right back out. And I go, okay, now think about. I'll talk to you again next week, but think about what does that mean? You know, what is your senses telling you that maybe you're going to put that aside because you just adopted something new? So, yeah. That's what happened.
So tell Uncle ease up on the gear, right?
Yeah.
No, I think it's important that we understand how native intelligence is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So even researchers, again, like I mentioned about those that want to come and do their research, we ask them why, and especially when they get close up and they're like when they get close up and want to tag our sharks, we're like, yeah, we consider what is the value of their study and who's doing it. Now, if there was a Kanaka that came forth and said, you know what, my amako is this, and there seems to be a disease with them, and I'm coming to you on behalf of my family, that I need to find out why. Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. But now that's not what they're doing. That's not what is posed in front of us. So a lot of that, we kind of shun that. But, there are others that are willing to contribute, and we do a lot of, what is it called? Presentations, or, we have a panel of us, and we sit in front of these new postdoctorate students, and they go, we're going off into our profession, and what can you do? This started last year. What can you teach us or give us tips to in working with communities with indigenous knowledge? And we were like, whoa. First of all, mahalo to whoever created this program, because that hasn't happened before.
Yeah.
And then we told them about approaching, it doesn't mean just for Hawaiians, but, anybody that has indigenous knowledge, approaching them in a matter, making sure that it's just not your agenda. Yes. What is the purpose of your research, and how does it benefit for the resource itself? Not to put your acronym at the end of your name, but really, how does it benefit? How does our fisheries benefit by you coming into our waters and doing your study?
Yes.
Are you giving the data to DAR, or Division of Aquatic Resources, or states, so that they can be informed on how to better manage their fisheries? And then if we do that, part of our agreement, if you're coming into our waters and you're gathering data, that we get a copy of it. We get a copy of, even though we may not, what does that mean? We want to make sure that we have a record of it, so that if it's taken out of context and it's ever put in the same sentence that kind of rewrites our narrative, we want to be sure that it doesn't do that. Yeah.
Mahalo. Yeah. One of the things that we face a lot too, right, is there's kind of the knowledge thieves, right?
Oh, yes.
Who definitely want to take it and do whatever they want with it, and place no ownership on where it comes from, right? They say, oh, it means this, but they don't say, oh, the Native Hawaiian practitioners told us this, and it's a big problem, and that's why it's so wonderful you guys use the Puluole-Mitchell Declaration to protect that knowledge, right? And also, I would add the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. That it is also another instrument that gets used as well as a global standard on consultations with Indigenous peoples, no matter where they are. But one other part to it is that we're seeing and working on also is getting people to understand that Indigenous traditional knowledge is science.
Yes.
And why is it science? Because it meets all the criteria of science. It means it's repeatable, it's measurable. So it meets all the Western criteria of what so-called science is supposed to be. So this disparity of Western science must be right, and Indigenous knowledge is a myth.
Right.
So we'll try to sort out the myth. It's like, no, it needs to be treated equally. If it meets those same criteria as science, it is science. That's what it is. We just have thousands of years of that knowledge to demonstrate that it is equal and important. And that's why it's important that the federal government has now elevated that, so.
Yeah, so coming from that community perspective on how they can protect traditional knowledge, utilizing the declarations from United Nations, the declarations from the Paukalani Declaration, customary and traditional rights and practices. So the community has these laws to protect them, to guide them, and to set some good foundation on incorporating traditional knowledge in policy development for guidance. And not all the time we need a policy or we need a law, right? Sometimes we just need cultural practice, right?
Do it.
Which is where I want to kind of shift over to Kalena about, does the government have a guideline besides developing a sort of a plan or CMP? How does the government deal with the challenges of protecting traditional knowledge, or even if they see it as a challenge, how do they treat and protect traditional knowledge within the CMP? Do you ever come across those challenges managing Vaukeleopuna, or have you seen that, like for example in Mauna Kea? How do they protect traditional knowledge? There's a government in your
Aloha ambassador.
Aloha, yeah.
Because we have, like I said, our own. If hunters want to come up, technically, hunting is prohibited.
Yes.
But if you're Hawaiian or you're married to a Hawaiian, you're bringing your Hawaiian children up to teach them. There's certain access, and I know I'm not being. So, like law enforcement, we don't have any. OHA doesn't have. We don't have law enforcement.
Yeah.
That's a 26,000 acre forest reserve, and that's what I have to, like, do I look scary? So I have to make nice and make sure that I'm always on good terms with the wildlife biologists, with the doe care officers, and I respect them. But so that they know, because we don't have. If something starts to happen, I have to make sure I have a good relationship with them.
Relation building.
Yes, yeah. And we have an active volcano. So on the other kuleana we have is like tourists and illegal tours trying to come onto, to see the lava. And so, we have to have that kind of relationship, but we have to be flexible so we can make sure our beneficiaries are able to
have access.
Yeah, and I have to still work with like specialists for processing rare plants, because technically we don't have a permit. So we have to make sure we are always collaborating with experts that are permitted to ask for their help, because we don't have money either. OHA has lots of money. We're always giving loans out. We have to function without, our property. We don't necessarily have access to that kind of funding. So we have to be creative in the field and nurture our relationships with, all the people. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, mahalo. At this time, I'm going to transition our conversation and field some of the questions that we've been receiving from our online audience. We have a slew of them. And I'll try my best to cover at least some of the relevant questions to the conversation that we're having regarding Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge and how that's applied in governance. This one, I think I do want to exercise this particular question. And it's to do with, here we go. This one is about the CBSFA. So Uilani, this particular person had asked, at the moment, Big Island, Molokai versus Molokai, is it Molokai or is it CBSFA joining the colonizers? And so I think their question is attached to the ideology of CBSFA, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure I'm trying to understand the question, and I might get it wrong, but I think because I seen another question that's similar to saying that CBSFA is a colonizer's process, and are we then succumbing to the colonizer
yeah. That's a good
by
question.
doing this?
That's a good question.
So if I can get a mana'o from you
Yeah.
as the administrator of the Miloli CBSFA.
Yeah. So CBSFA, like any other HRS that gives us guidance for designation of our fishery, and then and by having that allows us to manage within a framework of like a co-manager or state agency. So we're a partner with DLNR at this point because we had our number one, we had the designation, and then two, we had our rules to promulgate. So I remember, so let me put it this way. I remember thinking when I got involved with this, I was thinking really hard. I was like, why didn't my grandfather take care of this? Like all my kupuna were very active in Honolulu at the Capitol and so forth. And he ran a store, he was a postman, he did a lot of things. I was like, why didn't he handle this? And I truly believe that 2 generations ago, we're still operating and living our life under the cultural standards of the place. You have to answer to all the kupuna in the place. Like even now, you pass by, you go down the street, you pass by, you're coming up out of the water. And if you got anything illegal, you have to answer to everybody you're passing by. That's how social norms happen. In social norms, Miloli still retains that. So our kupuna can start a conversation and they speak first, but they always have the last word on anything. We still have the social norm of our po'olawai'a. So when we were putting together our road package, po'olawai'a came. Even though you have 4 or 5 from a family, everybody else knows not to say anything. Only the po'o speaks. If that po'o doesn't attend, that po'o will name somebody else in the family to attend. So this is the way it goes. It doesn't mean that we're falling under any other social norm other than for our community. But this is the way Miloli is. And so when we talk to them and when we were working with the state agency, I remember they wanted to come down. They were putting a foot down on one of the rules, and they're making a recommendation more restrictive. And then after that meeting had happened, I get a call from the state and says, can we come down and talk to your community? I go, for what? And he says, well, like we do, we always talk and everything will be all fine. And after I go, are we talking about what was just overran on our rule recommendation? He goes, yeah, but if we come down, maybe we could just everything will be fine. And I had to ask him, are you just as vulnerable as you think my community is to accept that? If you're willing to come down and talk to us with a chance that we could overturn that, is that a possibility? He goes, oh no. I go, well, why are you coming? Because number one, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to come, you're going to piss off my kupuna, and you're going to leave. Who's got to fix it? Me. He goes, oh, yeah, okay. No. And that just tells you, your social norms, if you can have that, accomplish what you need for your community. And in this particular case, our fisheries, which is 18.6 miles, if we could accomplish it without a CBSFA designation, we would have done that. Even in the last meeting in front of the board, we said, these are rules that we wish to promulgate. And we leave it up to you. We've done all the work. We've had all the input and everything. We've done outreach. But I'm telling you, this is the rules that our community lives by. We hold our standards up to this. CBSFA or not, this is what we're recommending.
I like that you bring that up, Uilani, because I think it's important for the public, whether you're Native Hawaiian or not, to understand that this was a generational process. You deliberately did not say it took you guys 18 years or 20-something years, 27 years actually, to come to this point of managing your marine resources.
Right.
You deliberately did not say that because you wanted to honor the kupunas before you that actually started the process.
Right.
And so it's not a matter of saying it's a colonizer's process
Right.
or decolonize your process. It's a matter of honoring place-based knowledge.
Right.
And I think given the task for DLNR to come forward and work with communities, which we know they failed drastically in that process, because Office of Hawaiian Affairs had to step in with resolutions to help them, and we still have to help them with this process. It's not done, and there's a lot to clean up on. I just was talking with Trustee Trask about that earlier, about how we need to be a little bit more proactive to help support the other communities who are trying to include CBSFA. And I know on Molokai or Molokai or whatever, however you want to call it, but here in Kona, I learned how to say Molokai and Molokai. I think it's important that everyone has their options and know what their options are, thoroughly know what their options.
Right.
So that, and then meaningfully be consulted. I think that's an important thing in the whole process, that we can teach the state how to do that, you know.
And I think the point also to bring up is that here I am getting involved in this, and why was it me? And so if I'm sitting in the seat, it's like I'm making a choice that, yeah, we're going to push forward and do this. But that's how I question myself. Why did my grandfather take care of this, you know, before? But traditionally, about how we became and have always been stewards, that was never a question. Never a question. I only used the assertion maybe 1 or 2 times. We did it when we had to make a point to Division of Aquatic Resources, identifying that our lineal ties are to Konahiki of the area. I had to tell them my genealogy. I had to identify who was the Konahiki of the place and how it comes down and never left our people. And so that kind of changed a little. But I think those are the steps that we need to educate the state. And it talks about our pilina with our aina in different ways, and that we have to be still the facilitator of that conversation as well as into that spaces. Yeah, it's a different mindset, and yes, I do get, you know, a perspective of colonizer, but I was given a choice, and not just alone. I wasn't just myself alone, but my cousins, between 3 or 4 of us, had to make the choice of whether we were going to move forward and put this in place for the protection with the voices that we have now, because our children that are coming up after us, we had to go now because we still had the stories. We still had the stories of our kupuna of the place. We still had the traditional knowledge. And I still had the names of all the Konahiki from the area that I could stake claim to. But yeah, it's important to know the distinction. And I get the question. I totally get the question. And it's a difficult one for someone to say if they claim they want to give in to the colonizer. We were on Facebook. Somebody said, "Oh, you're making a deal with the devil." That was like one person. And we're like, whoa. But then, you know, every time we met with the state, every time we met after outreach, we always checked with each other. The next morning, we were like, "Okay, you okay? You okay? Like, you didn't lose your voice, or your feet isn't sore. You know that we didn't step on the wrong path that our kupuna told us not to, and we didn't lose our voice because we were making assertions that wasn't pono." So that was a way that, again, in how we conducted ourselves was all traditional ways that we would expect under the guidance of our kupuna watching over us. Yeah.
And I do want to add, thank you, Uilani. I do want to add that in our ho'olauna at the beginning of our session this morning, that Uilani had introduced herself as a descendant of Miloli, and that Uilani, the CBSFA, is being carried out by actual residents in the village. And so you being the administrator, you've mentioned how you live in Pana'ewa. and you're linearly tied to the place. I'm sure you spend a lot of time down there at Grandma's house. But I just want to make mention for our viewers that because I just want to say that place-based knowledge is carried out by people living in the area. And that the commitment is not just linearly tied, but you have people who are tied to the place, the environment, and that's their pilina. And so I just want to mention that I do know personally people, including my godson, who is also an employee at the CBSFA as well, who contributes to managing and looking things through the lens of our kupuna down there. So thank you very much for sharing that. There's a couple more, and then we can start wrapping up our conversation. One, it's kind of interesting.
Which one?
You can choose either one if you like, Kealoha. One, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. It's up to you. I think they're all great, but I was gonna whichever one you choose, I'm gonna choose one more, and then we'll po kalava.
Okay. For both of you guys, I guess this would be a question. Why should we teach Indigenous knowledge in science? In science? That's yeah.
Well, first of all, they completely align and they support each other. I mean, if you look at our Kumulipo, biology, it's right there. I mean, you want to be using our Kumulipo in reverse. It should be us teaching it this way and then teaching our sciences through the lens of Indigenous knowledge, I think. I mean, when somebody says, well, we throw the tea leaf in that water before we go in, and it's spinning and it's foaming, and it sucks down. We think old way, the wahine mo'o is in there, we can't go. No, we have heavy rains coming down from up in the mountain. It's pulling all this water in, undulating it underwater at boiling pots. That's where the guy gets sucked in and killed. I mean, we just look at how we observe, how we look at things, and use that observation to manage what the science is behind it. And really, it's just flow of water, hydrology, sucking people in. But we use the tea leaf at first, right? I don't know if that makes sense.
Rather than being the victim first.
Yeah. That's just one baby example.
Also because that's how our tutu taught us. That's how you make. That's how you know, right?
Yeah.
That is what knowledge is. I mean, we get all bunged up because the Western voice is always the dominant voice and dictating what everyone on the whole planet is doing. And this is actually a way to reverse that and say, well, actually, we have some knowledge too. In fact, it predates the creation of America. It goes back millennia. And I think Uncle Paka taught me this one where he said, 2,000 years of knowledge is better than one data set that you have offered Western scientists. Mahalo. There needs to be mutual respect. We don't need to put Western science down, but Western science does have to take its place among the knowledge and experience and ike kupuna, of our ike kupuna. That's the way to balance it, because that's why our world is backwards,
I think that's the intent of ITEC.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's the intent of ITEK. Yeah.
Just one more, and then you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, being piggy. Our eruptions, our olis, our chants, those are the stories. They're all oral stories written, and they document eruptive events. And it's all, I'm a geologist, no disrespect. Oh, look, we were studying this ash layer, and blah blah blah. At this time, during this time period, there was an eruption, an ash event, and then you go look at our chants, and they completely align with Aila'au, the collapse at Thurston Lava Tube, or Nahulu. So that's a funny question. It should be reversed. Use our our, Ike Kapuna to back up and support modern science. Go ahead, Louise, sorry.
No, kako opiha wau I ia mana'o, that, science is a body of knowledge that is here. Our life ways are here, and then it's evaluated in its value with Western science, but it's like, the question doesn't even exist to me. It doesn't exist to me.
Yeah.
But a good position when we were recommending rules, and there were rule sets, data sets that are being placed up by Division of Aquatic Resources. And we told them, oh, come on. You drop into our waters once or twice a year, and that's the data you got? When we have fishermen, as long as Kealoha lets them in the water, they're in the water X amount of days out of a week. Like, how can your data challenge ours? They go quiet at that point. They go quiet.
Plus the kilo, the practice of kilo itself
the number one.
Is indigenous. Like how we kilo and translate that into resource protection, right?
Yeah. So a positive thing on this is knowing that Miloli does, kilo is the basis first. And then collection with, and if you think about when they do biological studies, they cut open the fish and they look at the gonads and whatnot. Well, when a fisherman cut open a fish and they saw that, they would know 1 month from now, I have to back off. They're going into spawning. They know that. But that's not taking into, it's different. Yeah. So, it's there. They're trying to catch up. That's what ITEK seemed to us. It was announced, oh, you guys are catching up, okay? Here in the community, we're running it, we're living it and whatnot. You guys are catching up, yeah.
Beautiful. Mahalo.
Awesome. Mahalo nui. Let's see. I think we got time for one more question. Do you think it's beneficial to learn other ways of doing things? I think this is a really broad question, but I think, Kalena, you made mention that we should look at the lens from the Kumulipo and then expand out to that. But do you think that we should also broaden ourselves to the point of to learn other ways of science and application, and include that in not just Western, but other indigenous ways?
Well, how about all the other indigenous people? I mean, they're doing the same we do. So yes, of course you'd want to be coming together and learning from other people in other ways. Yeah.
Ilani, what about how would that apply for Miloli as well, that question?
What's the question?
Do you think that it's beneficial to learn other ways of doing things? So I used the analogy that Kalena used, like we should look at the world from the Kumulipo and then expand out.
An example of that's going on is being at the table conversations with fisheries research that's going on. Miloli was highlighted in that agenda in two locations. One, to identify, the Pakukui life history according to our kilo that we've been doing, because it's impacting the Pakukui shutdown on West Hawaii that started about a year and a half ago, and they have half a year left to get the rule package or recommendation that they're going to ask, whether to lift it or to put a bag limit or what have you. And so that's a recognition that we're moving in the right direction. Not saying that anyone is better, but being, I think, cohesive in identifying what is the best way for the data to be acquired and placed in front of decision makers. And that's the thing, right? We like where we're at as being a CBSFA co-manager because we are one of those decision makers. And that's a strategic thing, right?
Yes. So
we are considered a co-manager, and I use that title anytime I need to. We're a co-manager. I should have preference on any SAP that has to do with managing the fisheries on behalf of the state. So part of that is like what's happening now is making way for Western science. We're at the table with them, and then we're having our discussions and providing input on data that's collected from Hilo, from any biological data that's, I mean, they call it biological, but we call it cutting it open and looking, right? You know, like, okay, you can call it biological, but yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate.
They didn't ask any questions.
Yeah.
Oh, does anyone here want to ask any questions?
Yes.
There.
Corey. Aloha.
Okay, one second. Let me rephrase that so the audience can hear online. Can you say that again? What does Western science
do best?
Do best.
And what does indigenous science or knowledge do best?
Okay. Yeah. So what does Western science do best, and what does
well, they publish papers. They publish a methodology for acquiring data, and I think because they do it consistently, and they get reviewed, I think it's a good thing. Indigenous knowledge is lived by. Is the difference. We're not an experiment. We live by these traditional practices. That is our science, our ike kupuna. And so the survival of our community, the survival of our traditional practices is based upon our science that still lives on today. If we still have our fish in our waters, we're making headway in the right direction. Our battles, or where we get challenged between one or the other, is when we have maybe like a state that is managing the fisheries, and then you have a community that is a subsistence fishing community. Being late in the game, meaning that we've only been in a CBSFA co-manager with our rules from 22. We have a lot to work up towards replenishing a lot of our fish. Yeah. So one example of us that doesn't seem, you never think about it, but we got challenged on using spear guns. And spearfishers were saying, you know, it's very accurate, and we won't harm the fish. We'll take it out. And we're like, well, our kids who learn how to swim right after they walk, learn how to operate a 3-prong in elementary school. They dive very confidently, free dive, by the time they're out of elementary. And so that skill set they learn, they can take out a fish responsibly and be just as accurate as someone who is versed in a spear gun. And so I'm just comparing it to our thought of someone saying, oh, you know, it's more responsible if you allow us to use spear guns. Because in our waters, there are pu'uhonua that we retain. You cannot do anything but traditional practices of our ways. You cannot use any spear gun in them. And so we hold that throughout our 18.6 miles. There's still certain pockets. You can go outside of that. We only have small pockets, 4 locations, and then our primary area, which is where our village is. And we retain that to be all traditional. Yeah.
Thank you. Kalena, do you want to expand on the question?
I'm not sure how much it applies to Vaukele. I know that when we had our 2018 eruption, I was notified by HVO that there were earthquakes happening right central in Vaukele, and they thought the eruption was going to take place there. So those are scientists with their seismographic machines all throughout our island and a direct phone call. But also regular normal people can do observations and see heat source, vents that are venting when we're out in the field, the ground that's hot, and know too, again, oh, we're going to have an eruption here. At least it warned us, so that was that scientific information that alerted us, and then it opened in Leilani Estates, just a couple miles away from Vaukele. Yeah, I'm not sure how I would apply that.
No, I think that's great.
question
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
to
Mahalo.
yeah.
I think it's a common theme that it's coming together.
Yeah.
You know, modern science informs her, but yet we can't avoid the data that's already been acquired through our mele and mo'olelo that dictate what.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, and you know, ua ikea, mai pa'a i ka leo, right? And that's how we affirm the PhD in our science is you have to experience it, and it's through your leo that you get the PhD status. So if you don't experience the ecosystem, you know, if you cannot ua ikea, then you cannot authentically speak on it, you know. That's why we ho'olauna before we start our process, because you shouldn't be able to speak on cultural nuances if you haven't participated in the culture, And that's what gives that credence. And then, of course, on the Western side, it's the classroom setting, the institutionalized approach, And I wanted to kind of summarize up this conversation for that question is, as we work on workforce development, I've been working with DLNR, Department of Aquatic Resources, here on the island through their offices, and we're working on developing positions that are community-based positions, specific in these different areas, to hire expert knowledge holders of traditional knowledge as the foundation, because if you dove in our waters for 20 years of your life to do subsistence fishing, then you would understand the different colors of the water and what that means. You would understand why the water bubbles up when you put the tea leaf down. And so that approach is foundational. And so now the state is working on hiring individuals based on that knowledge, because the Western knowledge can be applied just as easy into that process. It's hard to bring the traditional knowledge to the table because that has some criteria that's much more stringent than the Western knowledge. So we're finding ways on how we can build workforce development in that way on this island.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, because when Dar was talking to us, and you know, they don't need a permit themselves to dive in our waters. They can collect anything, anywhere from any. And so when they were going to do a study for Pakukui, they said, "Oh yeah, well, you know, we can go and get into the waters in Miloli." I go, you know, we just went through all of this. You know, we just gained a rapport with the community, and that is darn rude of you guys to think you can stand behind your title and you can jump in our waters and collect fish. And so they said, "Oh." You go, "Well, you know, we have to, you know, we think it'll be valuable." I go, "Okay, so let's do this. You hire our divers." And so we had set up the whole thing. It didn't work out the timing wise. We didn't need more samples, but that's an example of thinking to make the opportunity work for both parties.
Yeah, and even the state trying to develop employees outside of the state hiring criteria
Out of Honolulu
was the challenge. And so, of course, they run it through other, like RCUH and stuff like that. Anyway, sorry, Kealoha, you wanted to
No, I just
add?
wanted to say also, I've had experiences where people call because they want to consult, which is really good. I had an example where somebody called and says, I said, "Oh, what is your study on?" And they said, "Tea leaves." And I'm like, "Okay, so, and who of the kupuna have you interviewed?" Right? And they're like, "Nobody." And I said, "Okay, well, what science do you wish to achieve for the tea leaf?" And I got this long explanation, but basically it's just like what it does and what it's for. And I said, "Well, okay, first of all, you just need to start with a kupuna, and let me give you some names. You start before you get to me, okay? Because they are the experts."
That's meaningful consultation,
But, someone's doing a study. Even getting federal funds to do a study on tea leaf. What? Whoa. Better ask the people who've been living with it for thousands of years. In fact, tea leaves are adapted to live with humans. They rely on humans, right, to even propagate in many ways. So anyways, I just wanted to say, I think what is going on, I'm feeling a good trend, is that it's becoming more balanced with some of these discussions and building relationships. I mean, we might be critical in certain areas, but ultimately on both sides, there's people who really want to make it work for the betterment of the resource, because and we don't even like that word. We want to call them sources. Or sources. Yeah. They're not our resource. They're not exploitable. They are the source of our life. Yeah. And so I think with having good people, in these positions doing this is really helping overall both sides to have better insight and inspiration. That's all I want to say.
Yeah.
And I mean, you guys are awesome examples and doing awesome things, and you guys are the people in the community setting some really important standards. And I just mahalo you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Holding down the sacred sources for the lahui.
Yeah. Sorry, I gotta close it up. Yeah. It's time. Yeah. So, our call to action to our community, to the lahui, is to get involved. There's a lot of resources that was plugged in during the conversation. There's a lot of links. There's a lot of information that you can utilize to get involved in your own community. You don't have to travel all the way to Miloli to get involved and to utilize ITEK. You can do it right in your own front yard. There's ways on how you can contact the Office of Hawaiian Affairs if you need to figure out ways on how to apply ITEK into your community. Any one of your advocates would love to help you with that process if need to. With that, I'd like to mahalo our panelists, Kalena Blakemore from OHA, as well as ilani Naipo from our Miloli Ohana, managing the CBSFA, and that sharing how they implement traditional and ecological knowledge into their community, into their work, and into their profession, and how that rolls out for us Kanaka today. Earlier, Trustee Trask was here, and I remember when I was like 8 years old and watching her on TV protesting and everything, and I thought, oh, this is an amazing woman. At first, it was like I was scared of her, and then I learned to understand what she was doing, her and her family. And I do want to mention that because of them and many other kupuna that stood for our rights that we have today, our kuleana today is to make sure that we exercise those rights to the fullest extent possible, to better, not just to better our conditions, but to have a relationship to our own community and our own resource or source of life. So with that, I'm going to do one more plug. Don't forget to join our next panel this afternoon at 1 p.m. We have an awesome discussion with Kavika Lewis from Aina University and Donna Shapiro from Hawaii Ulu Co-op. And we also have a very special guest flew in from Oahu, Kuike Kamakea Ohelo from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. And we'll be discussing Aina Momona and self-determination. A very exciting panel. I'm excited to have that discussion. In the meantime, I'd like to say mahalo nui, Kealoha.
Mahalo to you.
Yeah, and mahalo to our guests. And we'll see you at 1 p.m. Ahui ho, aloha.
Mahalo.